I'm Tania Lewis, wildlife biologist at Glacier Bay National Park, here to talk about another research project that we have going on, monitoring nesting seabirds. In Glacier Bay, we have a variety of islands that are closed to human use to protect seabird nesting. One of the most common seabirds that we have on these islands are glaucous-winged gulls. And glaucous-winged gulls are large gulls. They have beautiful big nests full of grass and moss and sometimes even seaweed. They lay clutches up to 3 eggs, and they're pretty mellow when you're walking through a gull colony, but they nest very densely. And so it's really important that these areas are not used by people for camping or hiking because there's just nests everywhere. And there's the possibility of people trampling eggs, or even just repeated disturbance can cause the birds to move on, lose their clutches. And if it's cold and rainy and the eggs aren't incubated, they can actually perish. So for that reason, we close a lot of these islands. And in order to make sure that our island closures are in the right places and that there's still nesting going on, we do monitoring every year to track populations and track the distribution of nesting species. So another reason that we monitor glaucous-winged gulls in particular is to inform a collaborative Park Service Hoonah Indian Association gull egg harvest. And what we want to do is just ensure that that gull egg harvest does not impair the populations of glaucous-winged gulls. Luckily, when gulls and other species lose their eggs to, say, predation or flooding or human harvest, they can relay those eggs and still have a successful clutch over the summer. So that's one of the things we're monitoring. So at a lot of these colonies, in addition to glaucous-winged gulls, are black oyster catchers. Black oyster catchers are not as much a colonial nesting seabird as a solitary dispersed nesters, and they are spread out across the shoreline of Glacier Bay. Now, unfortunately, they love the same beaches that people love to camp on and hike on, they love to nest on. So I would encourage everyone to keep an eye out for black oyster catchers and give them some wide space around their nests. On some of these closed islands, they nest in even higher densities because they don't have repeated disturbance, not only from people, but also from bears and moose and all sorts of animals that might walk through their nests on the mainland. Black oyster catchers have beautiful nests of shells and stones. They usually lay 2 or 3 eggs, and they can be very defensive if you get too close. They will yell at you and make a big ruckus. They'll also act like they have a broken wing or an injured leg and try to get you to follow them away from their nest. And like all birds, the farther along they are in the nesting season, the more defensive they become. So as the chicks are hatched, that's when they get really, really defensive and protective of them. And the chicks are usually in the nest for a few days, and then they start to move out and move around with the birds. So keep your eye out. If you see a black oyster catcher making a ruckus, watch for the nest. Those eggs can really blend in with the rocks and pretty easy to step on, unfortunately. So give them a lot of space, please. Third species that are on some of the islands that are closed are Arctic terns. Arctic terns are colonial nesters, usually in big groups. We have colonies up to 500 in the park. And they don't only nest on islands, they also nest especially on glacial outwashes. So if you see a lot of terns, they're relatively small birds, black on their heads and orange bills. If you see a lot of terns, please be careful. Their nests are very hidden. They're just a couple eggs, maybe in a little tiny scrape, maybe just on some seaweed or on some vegetation. Hard to see, but what's not hard to miss is that small gull-like bird dive bombing you and yelling at you very loudly. And it can be quite intimidating. So if you encounter that situation, it's good to just get out of the area. So now that you know a little bit more about nesting seabird behavior, I encourage you all to keep an eye out for seabirds that are yelling at you, that maybe are pretending they have a broken wing, that are making a ruckus, and please pay attention to their nests. Give them a lot of room, and they will hopefully reproduce so that we continue to have seabirds in Glacier Bay nesting forever.